Okay, so the meeting is getting recorded now. So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this this last session for today. And today's session is on principal component analysis. Let me share my screen with you with principal component analysis. Okay, so I hope my slides are visible. Om Prakash, can you confirm?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay, thanks. So yeah, let's go ahead. So this is an outline of my talk. I will talk about, there is this method called principal component analysis, and I would like to think that it is a very widely used method in machine learning. Okay. We'll see that method as it has two purposes. One is the feature extraction or feature reduction. It was just pointed out now that these sort of techniques which we are looking at, principal component analysis or PCA, for example, it cuts across domains. Okay, it is used in computer science, in engineering, in any, even economics. People use it. All sorts of areas it is used. Okay, the humanities also it is used for many applications. So we'll look at it that as a data compression thing, essentially identifying the key aspects of the data and ignoring the rest. Okay, that is one thing. And we'll also talk about model extraction. In the morning, we talked of data reconciliation. And many of you have been asking, if I have large data set, what do I do with it? I may not have a model like the flow example I said. There you knew this is the amount of water coming in. This is equal to the amount of water going out. But what if you did not know about the network? You just had measured flows, which is typically the case for many of the problems. You do not know the underlying physics, but you can just observe some data, especially related to, for example, weather or climate, oceanography, consumer behavior. You just have data. You don't really know what is the underlying model. So I will show that through again that simple flow example, a similar flow example, that the model can also be extracted beautifully using principal component analysis. Okay. In these slides, there are some other topics which I will ignore, but the morning that sensor monitoring application, that SPND monitoring, that involved PCA also to extract the model. I will again talk about it quickly. Okay, so what is today about? What is this lecture about? So there is a saying in statistics that if you torture data enough, it will confess to almost anything. Okay, you can play with it and get the inference you want. Okay, so really today also we are going to torture data. Basically, we are going to do some transformation, but we'll do some gentle torture, meaning that we'll do some linear transformations, not so. Professor Scherer later on will talk of neural networks, okay, where you're doing some nonlinear processing. Here it is all linear processing. So you can say gentle torture of the data.
Sir, you are not audible, sir.
Now, is this better?
Yes,
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thanks. There is some problem in my that my headphone, the way it is connecting to the laptop. Okay. So this slide, it says data compression via feature reduction. So what is feature reduction? So see a typical problem that is encountered today. We are what you can say we are in the data age, right? We read in our history books or in school days there was a bronze age, iron age, so on. I think now you can say we're in the data age. We have so much amount of data with us in all disciplines, in all engineering disciplines. Okay, even on my phone there will be so much data sitting on my phone. So data is high dimensional. What do I mean by it? If I look at my car, okay, at any instant in time, there are probably now in a modern car, in some of the advanced cars, you might have hundreds of sensors. At every instant of time, you are recording these 100 observations. When you take your car for servicing, that guy will extract out that information and see how your car is behaving, what sort of maintenance it needs. Okay, that's just a car. If you go to any factory, modern factory making some products, you will probably have big factories, refineries, petrochemical plants. You will have thousands and thousands of sensors, right? So data is high dimensional. It is not 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional. I have 1,000 variables, 10,000 variables. Okay, so multivariate data, high dimensional data. So a big problem, how do we analyze the data? How do we store that data? How do we archive it? Even that is a big problem. Sooner or later, the storage space runs out. No matter you begin with, you have like no, my laptop to begin with had 1 TB. I'm so thrilled. My office PC had 1 TB 4 years ago. I was so thrilled. I so much space I have. Now I'm finding that I'm short of space. I have to routinely keep deleting something so that I can store new things. Okay. So a key aspect of making sense of data, storing data, visualizing data is feature reduction. What it means is that you take this high dimensional data. I have 10,000 variables. Somehow from that 10,000 variables, those 10,000 variables, I look at only 500 variables. Either I pick 500 variables from that 10,000, or I take 500 combinations of those 10,000 variables. Okay, so I go from higher dimensional space to a lower dimensional space. That is called as feature reduction. I look at a subset, a carefully chosen features, not at each and every variable individually. Okay, so this criteria for feature reduction can be different based on different problem settings. What we are going to look today is unsupervised settings, which says that just try to make sure that whatever is the information content, in some sense you think of information carried by data, the original 10,000 dimensional data, there is some information. When I go to 500, there is going to be loss of information, but that information loss is minimized. Give me that set of 500 variables. Okay. You could also have supervised settings. Okay, for example, you want to do some, you have some target that I want to do some activity. I want to classify something, whether the data, whether my plant is working properly or not, whether my car is running properly or not. I could make some inference from 10,000 observation, 10,000 dimensional data. Can I make similar inferences just from 500 dimensional data, right? So you could have a supervised setting by which you can choose that 500, the set of that 500 features. Okay, so now we are going to talk about unsupervised setting. So the problem is, so this you can think of as data compression also. Instead of storing 10,000 values at every second, I'm only going to store 500 values at every second. So I have significantly achieved data compression. Okay, I've reduced the amount of data which I'm going to store, and no, so storage becomes easier. Retrieval in future becomes easier. So given a set of data points of p variables, okay, I want to compute the linear projection. So what I'm doing is I basically I compute some new variable y. There is a small typo here. This should have been xp and not xn. I have p variables. Think of them as some sensors. I have p sensors. What I am doing here at very basic level, that's all it is really, I am constructing some new sensors y. So y1 is some g11 x1 plus g12 x2 and so on. Similarly, y2 is g21 x1 plus g22 x2 and so on. I have d such y's. Okay. Original sensors were p, the x vector was size p, length p, the y vector is length d. Okay, so this g is a transformation matrix sitting over here. Okay, so this is the data compression or feature reduction part, that I am going from p dimensional space x to a d dimensional space, and if d is less than p, I have achieved a feature reduction. I said we are going to torture data gently, so this is what I meant. Doing G transpose X, this G matrix is what we have to figure out. What's a good transformation matrix, so that the information content in Y is as close as possible, is as much as possible, which was there in X. The difference in the information content between Y and X is minimized. So I have to choose G accordingly. Okay, I said gentle transformation, gentle torture of data. That's what I meant. I'm not doing any non-linear transformation here. Matrix multiplication is just a linear transformation. Okay. So why perform this feature reduction? Why we want to go from p dimension to d dimension? D is smaller than p. Why we want to reduce the dimension? One reason is, of course, data is everywhere. This is the big data age, so to speak. In fact, Wikipedia defines big data as data sets so large or complex that traditional data processing applications are inadequate to deal with them. Okay, 2-3 years ago, or 5 or maybe 10 years ago, some of the, you know, if you talk to some industry partner and say, I will analyze your data, that person will give you a file which is like, no, 500 MBs. My PC, the softwares or no, the editors can't even load that file. Okay, so how do I even analyze that? How do I even begin this? How do I even begin when I can't even load the file, right? So of course, over the years, the software and the various softwares and the operating systems, etc., have increased. They have developed tools. But think of it, 1 GB, 2 GB file. If I have so much data, I mean, how do I load it? I don't know. So it's not easy to work with big data, and you have a lot of data now. Okay, that's the reality, and which is an opportunity also. Of course, challenges. Big data has its challenges. So there is a lot of variety in the data, different types of data. You have structured data, unstructured data, numerical data, quantitative data, qualitative data, okay, binary data, all sorts of things. Storage challenges, transmission, how do you transmit data? How do you analyze it? Data is noisy, data is erroneous. Many of these questions you have been asking in the morning also. We talked about bias in the data. I do perform a survey of person and person deliberately gives me a wrong answer. Okay, that's a bias now. It's no more random variability, right? How do you extract knowledge, which is ultimately what we want to do? Machine learning is all about this last part, knowledge extraction. Can I make some inferences from the data, learn something about my system, which I can then use to say something about the future behavior, right? This is just a cartoon to show that all data, even though you have a lot of data, unfortunately, all of the data may not be relevant or correct. Okay, forget relevance; it may not even be correct. So this is a cartoon, Dilbert cartoon, which just illustrates that, and I found that funny, so I put it. So this person has put some number on the board, and it's saying I didn't have any accurate numbers, so I just made up this one. So he's written some number randomly, and he's saying studies have shown that accurate numbers aren't any more useful than the ones you make up. And then the person asks, how many studies have shown that? Again, he's giving a garbage answer of that 87. Okay, so anything you ask him, he is just throwing a number from the top of his head. Okay, so data, unfortunately, the data that we collect, many times it has such observations which are not really meaningful. You can't really use this type of data for any analysis because it is not related to the system that you're working with, right? So we want to perform feature reduction. We don't want to work directly with this large amount of data because, as I said, there are a lot of challenges in it, both in terms of processing, and also all data may not be useful or relevant for us. So why perform feature reduction? Another reason is, so the reason is that I said a lot of data may not be useful for us. So intrinsically, data dimension is small. There is a lot of redundancy in the data. Okay, especially when you talk of engineered systems or no, weather systems, engineered systems, there is a lot of redundancy in the data. Example I gave in that flow example in the morning, I have 5 sensors, but they are related to each other. Those true values are related to each other based on mass balances, right? So do I really need all those 5 sensors? Can I work with 3, 2? So there is redundancy, there is extra measurements. Okay, so intrinsic data dimension is small. Only 2 or 3 you fix, the other flow rates will get fixed automatically. Okay, so that happens all the time when you have engineered systems, when you have weather systems and so on. You fix some variables, others are going to get fixed because they're all related. So I don't have to necessarily measure all of them and process all of them. So intrinsic data dimensionality is small. And this is a typical setting in many of the companies, factories. They have measured a lot, but the intrinsic data dimensionality is small. So that is one reason. That is actually, you can say, a reason why we want to perform feature reduction. Other one is that we can work effectively with small size data because intrinsic data dimension is small. Okay. Also, several techniques are not effective for high dimensional data. Some things which will work well when you are dealing with 10 dimension data, 15 dimension may not scale well when you're dealing with 100, 200 dimension, 500 dimension data. Okay. So there is curse of dimensionality. More dimensions create problems. Okay, the performance degrades as dimension increases. every new variable you bring in is bringing in noise with it, which is going to make my job more and more difficult. Okay, all those errors that we talked about, type 1 error, type 2 error, it will all contribute to that. You're giving me garbage information. It's like a doctor. Either he goes for kid, when I go to visit a doctor tells me very specific tests. You do these 5 tests and I will diagnose your problem. Or he tells me some 1000 tests, all possible tests. He say, go and do all these tests. And then he's looking at some tests which have no relevance to the problem at hand, right? So it's exactly like this. The doctor, of course, uses expertise. Okay, here we have a similar situation. We have so many variables, all of them are not relevant. So we want to look at the meaningful ones. How do we do that? How do we identify the meaningful ones in a systematic way? Okay. Other reasons to perform feature reduction are also because visualization is easy. I can visualize. If you have 10-dimensional data, I cannot plot it. 2-dimensional, I can generate plots in 2 dimensions. Maybe 3 dimensions, I can do some plotting. Beyond that, I cannot do plotting. Okay. In fact, in the linear regression example which Om Prakash presented, that 4 point was being predicted as a function of several x variables. That was a high dimensional data. In the sense you had 5 or 6 x variables. I could not plot y versus x because I do not know which x to use. X1, x2, x3, which variable to use. Okay, that's why I showed you the gasoline mileage example where I had only one x. So I could plot y versus x. You could see the confidence intervals, etc., on the predicted responses. I could not have showed that so easily for that 4-point example because data was high dimensional. You had 6 or 7 variables in all. Okay. So visualization is easy in lower dimensions, and many times when you can visualize data, you can use your judgment. You get a chance to make informed decisions, especially people who have expertise in that area. If you show them plots, they will say, like, doctor. That's why this GUI is, how do you visualize data? It's so important. Okay? You show the right plot to the doctor, the right image, the doctor will be able to figure out what is your disease. That's his expertise. If he can't see the image, he'll not be able to say. The reduced features present more effective representation for insights, even if physical meaning may be obscure. You will see that in PCA. Okay, the reduced features give us a lot of help, even though we cannot always physically interpret them. The reduced the variables of the reduced in the reduced dimensional space. It also leads to data compression. You have every second you are measuring 10,000 variables. You are storing only 500 combinations of those 10,000 variables. 500 is the size of that y, 10,000 is the size of x. Okay, so your storage requirements go down. Retrieval becomes easier in future. You can store data for last 2 years, and it can also be used for knowledge generation or model identification, which we will see. Okay, so there are various feature reduction techniques. Component analysis is what we are going to look at now. That is just one of them. There are others like independent component analysis, partial least square, canonical correlation analysis. Each has some applicable for some assumptions with own strengths and limitations. Okay. We are going to restrict ourselves to principal component analysis. So coming to PCA then, the problem in PCA is that's how it was actually formulated. I want to reduce so it's probably a 100-year-old technique now. The earliest papers came in, the Houtling's paper came in, I think, 1920s or 1918. So it's a 100-year-old now technique. Okay, and you'll find there are tons in books and papers on it. So huge amount of literature is there. So the problem is to reduce the dimensionality of a data set by finding a new set of variables smaller than the original set of variables. Okay, I had 10 variables to begin with. I want to find from those 10 variables, I want to come up with only 3 variables. Now it's not like I'm just picking 3 at random out of that 10, but rather I can get 3 combinations of those 10. Okay, the first variable is 0.1 times the original variable x1 plus 0.2 times x2 and so on. That becomes my y1, but I will go up to y3 only, right? So I have a new set of variables which is smaller than the original set of variables, such that I retain most of the samples information. So we'll see what is meant by information for this context in terms of variability in the data. So this is the unsupervised setting I talked about. So by information, we mean the variation present in the sample given by the correlations between the original variables. Okay, so we'll just see that in a while. So the new variables called principal components are uncorrelated and are ordered by fraction of the total information each retains. So they are in some decreasing order. The maximum information is in Y1, then in Y2, then in Y3, and so on. So it's useful for compression, classification, many sorts of analysis. So let's see what this illustration is being, a simple illustration. If you see the data x1, x2, let's say x1 is the weight of a person, x2 is the height of a person, okay, and let's say the origin is non-zero, or maybe it is mean centered data, so it is a deviation around some average values. That's why you can see negative quadrant also there is data. Okay, so if you see this data, so every person, I look at participants in this course, I get height and weight of every person. So my data is what? 2 dimension. Every person is represented by an x over here. But really, do I need to store the 2 dimensions? If you really see this x's, these crosses, they fall along this line, right? And why? Because there is a relation between height and weight. In general, we know that the taller you are, the heavier you will be. Okay. Of course, it is not a perfect relation, so it does not fit a straight line, but there is a significant relation between them. There is a significant statistical relation between x1 and x2. What if instead of storing the 2 variables, height and weight separately, could I store some new variable, 0.1 times height plus 0.9 times weight? Okay, some such combination. What is that combination which will capture some information in the maximum information? What do we mean by information? Here, in this case, if you see Z1, if I just take the X values and project them along Z1, you will see that for Z1, I will have a large spread of data. This value will give me a Z1 value somewhere over here, and this side is over here. So there is a large range, lot of variability along Z1. Z1 is some linear combination of x1 and x2. It's like rotating my axis. So for every original point which had x1 and x2 coordinate, it has a new Z1 coordinate. Z1 is some linear combination of x1 and 2. Okay. So Z1 you can think of as a reduced dimension. Instead of storing height and weight separately, I'm storing some linear combination of height and weight, which is Z1. What is the property of Z1? This is that direction. Amongst all possible directions in this 2-dimensional space, Z1 is a direction where I have the maximum variance. Okay. If I look at any other line and compute the variance of these numbers, when I project them on that line, the variance will be smaller than it is for Z1. So Z1 we say is the first component. If you want to go down from 2 dimensions, x1, x2 to 1, just project all data points along Z direction and store that coordinate. That this point is 5 in the Z1 direction. So I'm going to store 5 for person A, this person. Okay. If I want to go to the next principal component, I look at another direction which is uncorrelated with Z1. Basically, you can say perpendicular to Z1, which has now the next highest variability. Here it is 2 dimensions, so I can only go up to 2 dimensions. So this is the second direction, perpendicular to Z1. Okay, so Z1, Z2 are 2 principal components. The largest variability along Z1, next largest along Z2, and Z1, Z2 themselves are uncorrelated. So we'll see uncorrelation in a while, but this is at the core of PCA. If I remove Z2, just go with Z1, I have gone from 2 dimensions to 1 dimension. Okay. So more formally, given a training set of n observations and p process variables, so I have p sensors, you can say. Think of that flow example again. I had 5 flow rate sensors, so p is 5. And supposing I take 1000 measurements, at every second for 1000 seconds, I note down those flow rate readings. So I have 1000 cross 5 data matrix. This is the data that we have got. Yeah. Any time x is a vector of size p, indicating the values of those p sensors. Okay. What am I doing now? In PCA, I'm computing these linear combinations. I say, okay, I don't want to store flow rate 1, flow rate 2, flow rate 3 at every time. Rather, let me store a new sensor. I'm creating a new sensor. It's not a physical sensor. It's a pseudo sensor. It's a soft sensor. It's just a computer code I'm writing. I'm saying give me a new sensor y1, which is defined in this manner: L11x1 plus L21x2 and so on plus LP1xp. L11, L21, LP1, I have to choose. X1, X2, XP are your original sensor. This is my first pseudo sensor. Y2 is the second pseudo sensor. L1, L2, LP2, I have to choose this. And similarly, I can go up to YP. Original P, I can create new P sensors here. Okay, I will. So the choice in PCA is how do I choose these L's? That is one. And also, where do I stop? Do I go up to P at the end? Can I stop somewhere before that? And what is the loss in information if I do that? So here, without loss of generality, this vectors L1, L2, etc., which have these as the components L11, L21, P1, these vectors are taken to be of unit length. Okay, so L11 square plus L21 square plus LP1 square is equal to 1. So the PCA says that, so this is given to you that given X1 till XP sensors, you can create this new soft sensors. Supposing I give this problem to you and say, no, go ahead and do it. So question you will ask me, how do I choose this L11, L21, LP1? What's a good choice? If I just take L11 as 1, L21, LP1 as zeros, Y1 is simply X1. L22 is 1, everything else zeros in this equation, Y2 is X2. Then there is no transformation, right? But question is, by choosing some non-zeros, some interesting choices for L, can I gain something? Okay, that's what PCA is trying to do. So PCA says choose those vectors L, okay, with the following properties. Y1 should have the largest variance amongst all possible linear combinations. So X1, X2, XP, each of these sensors has some variability associated with them. They are fluctuating. I have 10,000 values for those flow rate sensors, right? So there is fluctuation in them. There are variations in them. Okay. As a result, they are all random variables. As a result, Y1 is a random variable. I'm saying choose that random variable. So Y1 is a function of this L1 transpose, this vector L1. Choose that L1 such that the variability in Y1 is maximized. Okay. So that in that sense, it captures the maximum information. It is the largest variance. It is a direction where the action is taking place. This is the direction where there is the maximum variability. The spread is the largest of the data. X1 had some variance. X2 had certain variance. Z1 is the direction with the largest variance. Okay. The same thing PCA is saying, Y1 should have the largest variance. So choose L1 such that Y1 has the maximum possible variance. That will fix your L1. Now you go to Y2, the next combination, the next soft sensor. Y2 should have the largest variance amongst all linear combinations while being uncorrelated to Y1. Y1, Y2, if I plot, I should not be able to fit a straight line between them. Okay, I will just talk about correlation in a while. And I can do this. Y3 should have the next largest variance while being uncorrelated to Y1 and Y2. So you can simply think PCA is doing a coordinate transformation. In the original Cartesian coordinate, you think of your axis as being perpendicular. We are doing something similar. I choose first Y1 as that direction where it has the maximum variance, Y2 as another direction which is perpendicular to it, but the direction is again of maximum, the next highest variability while being perpendicular to it. Think of this in high dimension, not just in 2 dimension. Okay, so you can keep going this. So what is the answer? The question you can, so this is the requirement with PCA. So what is the solution? Then what are these L1, L2? What do these turn out to be with these requirements? So it turns out that this problem can be solved analytically, and these vectors L1, L2 till LP, which define those linear combinations, they correspond to eigenvectors of the covariance matrix of X. The eigenvectors selected in decreasing order of eigenvalues of covariance matrix of X. Okay. Again, I'll give an example. It will become clear. Yeah. So first of all, so we are using these terms covariance. What is meant by covariance? So I presume that all of you are comfortable with the notion of variance, right? Professor Sharad Bhatt would have talked about variance as some expected value. So this is the expectation notation. The average squared deviation of a variable from its mean, right? That's your variance. So you can compute it from a density function, or you can compute it from a sample, summation xi minus x bar squared by n minus 1. Right? So that's the sample variance. So variance tells you how much a variable deviates from its mean. Okay? We can have for two variables bivariate case. We can also talk of covariance for a pair of variables. Covariance is this expectation, expected value of x minus its mean into y minus its mean. It says if I look at these deviations, x deviates from its mean multiplied by the deviation of y from its mean, what is the average value of this deviation? Again, if I have the joint density of x and y, I can compute this expectation. If not, I can compute it from data. For two variables, height and weight, for 40 participants, I can compute this. X bar is the average height of 40 participants, y bar is the average weight of 40 participants. Xi is for the ith individual, yi the height, and the weight for the ith individual. I can compute this. What is this covariance telling you? Covariance is giving you an idea of the relationship between these two variables. Okay. If you see here, okay, and so I'll show in the next slide. You can also talk of correlation coefficient, which is simply this covariance scaled by the corresponding standard deviations of x and y. Note that this covariance has units. If this x is height in feet, y is weights in kilogram, covariance has units of feet multiplied by kilogram. If I change the units, this covariance will change. So this is a dimensionless representation, correlation coefficient, where you are dividing by the standard deviation of x and the standard deviation of y. Okay. So this correlation coefficient ranges between -1 and +1. Okay, so this covariance is essentially characterizing the relationship between variables. So if you see here, what do you expect? Let's say the sign of this covariance of height and weight. X is height, y is weight. What do you think this quantity will be? Just the sign. Anyone wants to volunteer? The sign. Height and weight. What is it saying? If supposing I want to look at the sign, I'm adding certain terms, and each term is the product. If my height is larger than the average height, what do you think the weight will be? My weight will be. It is likely that my weight is also larger than the average weight, right? So when this is positive, the product is positive. Similarly, if my height is lower than the average height, my weight will also be lower than the average weight. This is negative, this is also negative, the product is still positive. So in general, for these two variables, height and weight, which tend to behave similarly, these products will more often than not be positive. So when I take an average across these n observations, this quantity will turn out to be positive. So I will say height and weight have positive covariance, or they are positively correlated. Okay. Similarly, if they are negative correlated, maybe something one variable increases, the other decreases. So if this is positive, this is negative. And if this is negative, this is positive. Supposing this happens, the variables have inverse relationship. Then I would expect this covariance to be negative. When do we expect this covariance to be 0? When xi increases beyond its x bar, I cannot say anything about y. Sometimes it may decrease, sometimes it may increase. So sometimes this product is positive, sometimes it's negative. On an average, they cancel out. This is close to 0. Okay. So we can have these cases. So this covariance quantifies relations between x and y. Okay. So in the next slide, I have sketched something. This is the case. If x and y have this behavior, if we compute the covariance, this case x and y will have positive covariance. The mean for both of them is 0, 0. That's how this data has been sketched. And you can say that for those of data points where x is to the right of 0, y also is above 0. Data points where x is to the left of 0, y is also below 0. Right? This is a case of negative covariance. X is to the right of 0, y is below 0, x is to the left, and y is above 0. Okay? This is a case of 0 covariance. When x is to the right, sometimes y is below, sometimes y is above. So you have this scatter of y. Similarly for the negative x. Okay? If you compute covariance here, it will turn out to be 0 or close to 0. Yeah. So covariance is telling you about these relationships. Okay. Of course, you have to keep in mind covariance is not foolproof way of talking of relationship. It is, you can say, captures linear relationship, straight line relationship. I have given an illustration here. Here, x and y are related. Can anybody tell me what is the relationship, the true relationship of x and y, which has generated this data? If I were to fit a line, my line will be just a horizontal line passing through y equal to 0. If I model y as a function of x or x is a function of y, then it will be this vertical line. Y is a function of x, it will be just this line 0. Okay. If I compute the covariance, it will be 0 covariance. For observations of x to the right of 0, sometimes y is below 0, sometimes y is above 0. But the covariance is 0. But are these two related, x and y? Can somebody venture to answer? Do you think x and y are related here? If I have to fit a curve, not restrict myself to fitting a straight line, what sort of curve will I fit? Yeah, any answers, suggestions?
Sphere, is it?
Sphere or circle in 2 dimensions, absolutely. It's actually the data is coming from a circle. X square plus y square is equal to a constant. So I fix x square gets fixed. I get 2 values for y. For a fixed x, I fix x at, let's say, somewhere. I get 2 values of y, lower value and upper value. So this y squared. So 2 values of y will work out. Okay, that's what I have plotted. Probably some noise has been added on top of x and y. So the true relationship is actually, it's a relationship is x square plus y square is a constant. So they are strongly related. You tell me x, y is pretty much fixed. There are only 2 choices of y once x is fixed, and vice versa. But if I look at covariance will be 0. So you have to keep in mind that covariance, the second moment, the covariance is called the second moment. You look product x and y. It gives you an idea of linear relationship, not of non-linear relationship. Okay, so what we are doing PCA, that's why we're doing linear transformation, linear relationships we are capturing. It's possible data has more complicated relationships, then PCA will not be able to extract those or capture those. That's the general thing in machine learning. So there are these kernel methods, kernel PCA. Okay. If you have heard across, if you have worked in some machine learning tools, you might have heard this term kernel. So that's essentially doing some of the data. Effectively, you can think of it like that, doing some transformation of the data such that in the transform space, all your linear tools start working. Okay. So we will not talk about kernel PCA, but kernel PCA, kernel support vector machines, and so on. There are all these kernel Fisher distinct analysis. So some of it you may get to listen. I don't recall now whether in classification we are going to talk about FDA and so on. But yeah, these ideas carry over to nonlinear relationships by use of these kernel transformations. Okay, so PCA, so covariance and correlation matrix computation. Let's talk of this. So this is for what I just showed you is for a pair of variables, right? What is our setting? We have more than 2 variables, 10 variables. So for every pair of variable, I can talk of this covariance, right? So I have 10 variables, 10 C2 combinations. Okay, I have 10 C2 covariances and 10 variances. For every variable, I also have variance. Variance would be, variance of x would be when y becomes x. So covariance of x with itself is like variance of x. Okay, this also becomes x. You get xi minus x bar squared. So that becomes your variance. So I have 10 variances and then 10 C2 covariances, which is 45. So I can stack all of them in a matrix and call that as the covariance matrix. Okay, so PCA is based on analysis of this covariance matrix, which you can compute from data. Okay. These observations xi, yi are available to you. That's the data that you have. Okay, this is what this is saying, that the covariance matrix can be computed when you had a data matrix with p variables, and for every variable you had n observations, p sensors, and n times you have measured the readings from those sensors. You can construct this covariance. Procedure is given here. It's not important, but this is how the matrix will look like, the covariance matrix. The diagonals, I put the variances of each variable. I have the p variables to begin with. At diagonals, I put their variances, and off diagonal entries, ijth entry is the covariance between xi and xj. This is 1, 2 entry, so covariance between x1, x2. Okay, this is 2, 3 entry, covariance between x2 and x3. Okay, And you can observe that what about covariance of x2, x1? Is it the same as covariance of x1, x2? If I go back and show you these expressions, if y and x are flipped, does this covariance, does this quantity change? The answer is it does not change. Whether I write y first or x first, it doesn't matter. It's a product, it's the same, right? So this covariance matrix is symmetric. Covariance of x2, x1 is same as covariance of x1, x2. Okay, so this can be computed from data in a very easy way, and this carries a lot of information about the behavior of the data, because that's what we saw. If the covariance between two pairs of variables is close to 0, I know that they are not related. If it is positive, I know that they are positively related. If it's negative, I can say they are negatively related, and so on. So this S is a P cross P symmetric, and it can be shown it's a positive definite matrix, which means that its eigenvalues will be positive. Okay. So one can again talk of the same thing, that really this covariance matrix which I'm getting from data, if I've computed these covariances and variance from data, this S matrix is an estimate of the true covariance matrix which I would have got if I had the full population, or the density functions, the joint densities of x1, x2, x1, x3, and so on. Okay. So the population covariance we denote as sigma. What we get from samples, n observations, we call it as S. So again, remember the Greek letter I talked about. Population parameters are using Greek letters, and the sample quantities are typically using English alphabets. Okay. We can also talk of correlation matrix. What was correlation? I said you basically scale each of this covariance will be divided by square root of variance of x1, square root of variance of x2, the corresponding standard deviation. Similarly for this and so on. And the diagonals all become 1. Correlation of variable itself is 1. Okay. So this is how your correlation matrix looks like, related to covariance, where you have scaled all the variables, all these quantities. Okay. So this also has information content of the data. Okay. Yeah. So this is called as the correlation coefficient, and again this is a symmetric positive definite matrix. Okay. And if the correlation matrix is obtained from infinite samples, you denote that as rho. From finite samples, it is P, Greek and English. So we can either work with the covariance matrix or correlation matrix. Which is more appropriate? In fact, it's been a so conventional thinking or conventional practice is that you work with correlation matrix, especially if your variables have widely differing scales. Some variable can be very high, some molecular weights 10 to power 6, 10 to power 5, some concentration mole fractions of 0.01, 0.02. You can run into numerical problems if you work with the original data. So you scale the data, bring it to some same units, dimensionalize it. Okay. So essentially you work with correlation matrix. It will have better numerical behavior. From that point of view, correlation matrix is better. From point of view of extracting information, it is not necessarily that correlation matrix will work better than covariance. In fact, there are a lot of research papers on saying what is the correct way to scale data. Okay, I will point out some of the research works as we go along. Right now, let's not worry about it. Okay, just as an example, for two variables, let's say this is the covariance matrix. This is the variance in x1, variance in x2. This is the covariance. What will be the corresponding correlation matrix? This 4 will become 4 divided by square root of 1 and square root of 100, which is 10. So it will become 0.4. Okay. Diagonals 1, odd negatives become 0.4. This is the correlation matrix. Okay. You can now get eigenvalues and eigenvectors of the covariance matrix. This matrix, these are the two eigenvalues. P cross P matrix has P eigenvalues and the corresponding eigenvectors. So PCA is just based on analysis of these eigenvalues and eigenvectors of these matrices, either correlation or covariance. Okay. Same way I can talk of correlation matrix also, eigenvalues and eigenvectors. Okay, coming back to PCA, what did we say? Given the original variable x, some x1 till xp we want some combination of those variables and create a new sensor, which I'm calling as y1. Okay, y1 is some e11 x1 plus e12 x2 and so on. What is this e? This e, what PCA says is the requirement was that amongst all possible e's, so we had called it L earlier, amongst all possible L's here, choose that L such that y1 has the largest variance. Okay. So PCA answer it to that problem should be the eigenvector, which I'm denoting as E1, should be the eigenvector of the covariance matrix of X corresponding to largest eigenvalue. Okay. So this y1 is called the first principal component. I will again illustrate that with the previous example. And this vector E1 is also called the loading vector in PCA terminology. That's not so important. Similarly, I can talk of y2. y2 is e2x. What is e2? Eigenvector of covariance matrix of X corresponding to second largest eigenvalue. Okay. So these vectors EI are called the loading vectors. They are essentially the transformations that you're using. Okay. And yi is called the principal component. y1 is 0.2 x1 plus 0.3 x2. So I have this principal component. And for any given value of x1, x2, x1 is your height is 5 feet, x2 is the weight of that person is 50 kgs. When I put 5 and 50, I get some value for this y1 that I will call as the score corresponding to the person. So for this example, let's say I work with the covariance matrix. These were the eigenvalues and eigenvectors. This is what my principal component would be. So transformed sensor. So instead of working with x1 and x2, two-dimensional data, if you just want to work with one-dimensional data, you can work with y1. What is y1? 0.04 x1 plus 0.999 x2. Where do these numbers came from? The eigenvectors, the components of the eigenvectors. What is the property that this y1 has amongst all possible choices of these coefficients? Okay, of course, these vectors have to be unit length amongst all possible choices of these coefficients such that their squares add up to 1. This is the combination where the variance in y will be the largest. Variance in y1 is a function of variance in x1, variance in x2, and also the covariance between x1 and x2. Okay, that relation I'm not writing, but this variance in y1 will be a function of variance in x1, variance in x2, and covariance between them. We talked about the covariance, the off-diagonal terms, right? So this has the largest possible variance. So if you just want to stop at 1, you give me height and weight of a person. I will not store height and weight. Rather, I will compute y1 for that person. I will multiply that person's height by 0.04, weight by 0.999. Whatever number I get, I'll store that against that person. So from 2 dimensions, I've gone to 1 dimension. Okay. Dimensionality reduction. Of course, I have lost something because from 2 I have gone to 1. I've lost something, but what I have lost is actually not much. What do I mean by that? If you see here, what is this eigenvalue telling me? If you notice, if you look at this, what is the diagonals? What is the trace of this matrix? The sum of these diagonals in the covariance matrix. This is variance of x1, variance of x2. Sum of these variances is how much? 101. You also know that for a matrix, okay, trace of a matrix is the sum of the eigenvalues. You see, you add these eigenvalues, you again get 101. It turns out that this eigenvalue tells you the variance in this direction. That if I use this as the coefficient of the linear combination, then the variance in y1, given that variance in x1 is 1, variance in x2 is 100, and their covariance is 4, the variance in y1 would be equal to 100.16 lambda 1. These lambdas are nothing but the corresponding variances in y1, which is obtained by projecting the data x on this direction, and y2 is obtained by projecting data x on this direction, on this vector. The variance in y2 is 0.84. Okay. Total, of course, adds up to 101. So if I simply do from x1, x2 to y1, y2, I have just transformed the two axes, got a new set of two axes. no loss of information. It's just that when I plot my y1 and y2 for all the participants, instead of plotting their height and weight, I plot y1 and y2. I will see that now the scatter plot is such that y1 and y2 are uncorrelated. You can see that in these two vectors, if you take a dot product, this component multiplied by this plus this component multiplied by this, you can see it is 0. These two are perpendicular vectors, right? So they are uncorrelated. We say that if I look at the covariance matrix of y1, y2, it will be a diagonal matrix. Okay. So this lambda essentially tells you how much is the variability captured in the corresponding direction. So if I just stop at y1, from 2 dimensions I go to 1, don't consider y2. I have captured lambda 1 divided by lambda 1 plus lambda 2, which is in this case 99.2% variability in the data. My loss is only 0.8%, the information loss. Okay, what do you mean by information loss? I can actually reconstruct, just from y1, I can reconstruct x1 and x2. Okay, and the reconstruction error, so to speak, okay, the variance in that reconstruction error is of this order, 0.8. Okay, so it's a very small reconstruction error that I will incur. So the loss of information is very small. If I store both y1 and y2, given y1, y2, I can exactly recover x and x2. But if I have only y1, I cannot exactly recover x1 and x2. Okay, there will be some error, but that error will be small. Okay, so this slide says that the sum of the eigenvalues is sum of variances in original data. I have some illustration code. I'll probably skip that. This is an illustration for some data. This is the original data, x1 and x2. I think it's the same matrix. Yeah, so we had this particular matrix, covariance as 1, variance is 100, covariance is 4, 4. So I generated data which satisfies this covariance matrix. So I can sample two-dimensional data. There are commands in our software, Octave and MATLAB, which can sample from multivariate Gaussian, where you specify this covariance matrix. So I generated some 1,000 samples, computed the sample covariance matrix. This is close to that sigma, but not exact. And then I did this analysis, computed the eigenvectors, etc. This is what I get. This is how the original data looks like. You can see there is a slight tilt in the data. And this is my first principal component, y1 and y2. Those two eigenvectors, e1 and e2. Those are the two eigenvectors, e1 and e2. I project all these points on e1 and on e2, and I plot them over here. Okay. Whatever is the value on in this direction, that is on the x-axis, and the projection on this particular direction is on the y-axis over here. And here you can see that orientation is gone. I have both y1 and y2. What was the property of this y1? This direction, this e1, it had the maximum variability amongst all possible directions. Next highest variability, next highest variance was this direction, and this is orthogonal to the previous one. Okay, so that is what we are doing. If we stop at 1, from 2 we just stop at 1 itself, we would have retained 99. We would have captured 99.2% variability of the original data. Okay, now this was of course 2-dimensional data. I could have 1,000-dimensional data, and I can stop at 5 principal components, 10 principal components, 15 principal components. How do I decide the stopping criteria? So there are some tests which says that, so you are ordered the principal components in order of decreasing variability they capture, and as you add more and more principal components, the additional gain in terms of variability capture decreases, and you see that after some time there is not enough gain. You say, I am not going to stop. So it's more like heuristic tests. Okay, there are some other approaches. Let's not worry about it. Let's go to some interesting example. Okay, I will show you this example. There is a let me show this example. So there is a track record data. Okay. It's a domain agnostic example. This is not related to any engineering domain. So this is 1984 national track records for women athletes of different countries. So actually the timings the best timings in each country, what were the records in each country for 100-meter race, 200-meter race, 400, 800, 1500, 3000 in marathon for women athletes. So it is given for all the or several countries of the order of 50 or so, 55 countries. Okay. So if I think of these countries as samples, these are my sensors on the columns. I have 7 sensors. Okay. What am I? So supposing I ask the question, I want to figure out how do I rank these countries? Which is the best country? Which is the worst? How do I rank this? Okay. So let me just apply principal component analysis on this data set. Okay. 7-dimensional data, 7 sensors, 55 observations. 55 times I've taken the measurements. Okay. So let's apply PCA on this data and we see something very interesting. Let me go to my presentation. Okay. So first I do some pre-processing, in the sense I compute the covariance matrix of the data, or I have done it after scaling. So basically the correlation matrix. Then I find eigenvalues and eigenvectors, and then do this principal component business. So some sample statistics for each of these races. 100-meter, the average time across all those 55 countries is 11.61 seconds. Standard deviation is 0.45. 200-meter, 400-meter, 800-meter marathon, and so on. I don't know whether this all in second. Maybe this would be in minutes. Okay, the higher ones are in minutes. Yeah. So the average marathon time, so slightly less than 3 hours. Okay. I get the correlation matrix. This is the correlation matrix from those 55 observations. Data dimension 7 cross 7 dimensional. Correlation matrix is 7 cross 7. These are the this is the correlation of variable with itself. This is the correlation of a variable with other variables, M1 with M2, timings in 100-meter with timings in 200-meter, and you can see that it's highly positively correlated. Means if a country has low value in M1 100-meter race, low timings, it also will have low timings in 200-meter. Same people typically run both the races. If somebody is good in 100-meter, that person will be good in 200 meters also, right? And you can see that as I go over here, the correlation decreases. Between M1 and marathon, the correlation is on the lower side. It's not as high. It is still positive, because some countries very good in short distance races, but not so good in long distance races. These are like long distance races, or especially 3,000-meter and marathon. Okay. So this sort of that's all you need. Now this matrix, you have these variables. So 7 sensors you can say for every country, but those all sensors are not they are not giving you all independent information. There is a lot of redundancy in that, right? And typically, if I ask you to list out the top countries, you'll probably be able to list out a country which does better in one race. It's unlikely it will do very bad in other races also. So there is a lot of redundancy in the data. So we want to see what PCA gives us. We take this data set, we take this covariance matrix or correlation matrix computed from those 55 cross 7 data matrix. Okay. And we look at the eigenvalues and the eigenvectors. Okay, let me see if I have it here. Yeah, I have these eigenvalues of this matrix in decreasing order. It's a 7 cross 7 matrix. I have 7 eigenvalues. You notice something very interesting. One eigenvalue is large. Other eigenvalues are not so large. Okay. Anyway, the first 2 eigenvectors corresponding to these eigenvalues are listed over here. Right? These are the corresponding eigenvectors. What PCA tells us is, I want to rank the countries. So I will say, look at the first principal component. Don't look at performance in 100-meter alone, 200-meter alone, 300-meter, 500-meter, or 400-meter alone, and so on. Look at performance in a new artificial race, which I'm calling as Y1. How will I define Y1? As 0.3684 into 100-meter timing plus 0.3654 into 200-meter timing, and so on. So I've created a new variable. For every country, I'll create a new time. Okay, in that Y1 representation, obtained by using these as the coefficients in that linear combination. Similarly, for Y2, I will go with these as the coefficients. For y3, I would have looked at the third eigenvector and done that. I'm stopping at 2 based on certain criteria. Between these two, how much variability I will capture? 5.8 plus 0.6 divided by the sum. That much variability I have captured. It will be pretty high, 90% or something. I have it here. Maybe it will be somewhere later. So two components are pretty good in terms of capturing the variability in the data. So my first principal component is this. Okay. So you give me for any country the timings x1, x2, x till x7. I will create a new time called y1. And it turns out that this is the direction, this particular combination. Where do these coefficients come from? I did not specify them. Data is telling me that. Okay. Can you interpret them over here? You see that roughly they are same orders of magnitude, and they're all positive and similar in magnitude. So essentially, y1 can be thought of as average athletic excellence of a given nation. Okay? In some sense, you're doing an averaging, just multiplying each timing in each race by a similar number and adding them. What about the second principal component corresponding to second eigenvector? If I put that, this is what I get. Again, data is telling me that this is the next direction of the highest variability while being uncorrelated to here. So the timings in y1 and y2 timings, they'll be uncorrelated. If I were to compute their covariance, it will be 0. What does this give me? It just data is telling me I have not done anything. It is, you can think of x1, x2, x3 as short distance races and x4, x5, x6, x7 as long distance races. So it tells you roughly the difference between timings for short races and timings for long races. That happens to be the direction of second highest variability. Okay? It is just chance that I have got these coefficients. No physics based interpretation. These are the directions. What can I use them for? Now, instead of representing every country in a 7-dimensional plot, I can represent a country in a 2-dimensional plot just by computing y1 and y2 for each country. These are the other 5 eigenvectors. I'll skip this. Originally, 55 countries, I could not plot them. How will I plot a 7-dimensional data? I could not visualize it. What I do is now I have this 2-dimensional data set. For every country, I have y1, y2. I plot y1, y2 values for every country over here. Okay, and now you can do some visualization. Immediately you see some country over here. Oh, this value, this is an outlier. This country has a high value of y1, high value of y2. High value of y1 means, so even this one has even higher value of y1. Okay, higher value of y1 means country takes the lot of time. The timings are very large. The y1 had some interpretation. Okay, so this country is like a laggard. It has very bad records, large times for across all those races. Even if you can't interpret it always, you can see that this is different from the rest of the countries. This is also probably different from the rest of the countries. It's isolated, it's separated out. It's like an outlier. Immediately, the moment you can visualize, you can make a lot of analysis. You can go and check your data. Is there something happening for these countries? Something special? Okay. And if I were to rank the countries, of course, in this case, y1 had a nice interpretation. I could rank the country based on their y1 values. The one with the smallest y1 is the best, and the next highest, and so on. And here, if I were to, I have to just rank them. Let me show you the file again. Based on y1 value, if I were to rank them based on the score for first principal component, you see that the rankings match our intuition. The best country is the German Democratic Republic, USSR, USA. This is the old data, 1984 data. These are the top performing countries in sports. India is somewhere in the lower half, not at the bottom, but still in the second half. Okay, 39. So these rankings match our intuition. Of course, in this case, it so happens that I could interpret that y1. That is not always possible because these coefficients we have got just from data. There is no physical insight behind these coefficients. It's not always possible to physically interpret them. If you don't understand, especially if you may not understand, you don't have understanding of physics of the system. Okay. Yeah. So, so there is some other way of visualizing data, which is called as biplots. Again, I think I'll skip that. This is from principal component. You can generate these biplots, which again shows you that there are some outlier countries which are performing very bad. Cookies Island, Western Samoa Island, Western Samoa cookies. This is GDR doing quite well. India is somewhere over here. It also shows you how those variables, those 7 sensors, they themselves are behaving. 200 meter, 100 meter are similar. Countries have similar performance. The long distance races have similar performance. Okay, they are clustered together. So this is something called biplots. Let's not worry about it. I will skip it. You can do the analysis in 3 dimension. Go up to another principal component, y1, y2, y3. Again, plot the different countries in this 3-dimensional coordinate system. Okay? Again, do some analysis. Beyond 3, of course, you cannot plot. Okay. Yeah. So what have we done so far? You have gone from 7-dimensional data to either 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional data. Okay. Done the reduction. You have original data was p-dimensional. Now you have got a d-dimensional data set. Okay. The original matrix you can say was 55 cross 7. Now you have 55 cross 2 data matrix. For every country, you are storing only the corresponding y1 and y2 values. What was y1 for that country? What was y2? Okay. And P is the transformation, which corresponds to those 2 eigenvectors as columns, which you have used in this transformation. So dimensional reduction, feature extraction, we are looking at only these 2 features, these 2 particular linear combinations of the original 7-dimensional data. Yeah. So if you, I'll skip this also. I talked about that if you, amongst all possible 2-dimensional representations of the 7-dimensional data, one that we that's the best one in terms of maximizing the information that we have to 2 dimensions. What do we mean by that? Supposing I go back from that 2-dimensional data, can you reconstruct the timings in all the 7 races just by knowing the y1 and y2 values? It turns out that you can, yes, you can reconstruct them. Reconstruction will not be perfect. There will be some errors, but those errors will not be large. Okay, because information loss in the remaining 5 dimensions which you ignored, that was not much. Those directions had small variances, small eigenvalues. Okay, so without getting into the details, this is just shows you that reconstruction. This is the original x1 timings for all the 55 countries after normalization, so 0 mean. This is the reconstructed x1, and if it's on the diagonal perfectly, it's a perfect reconstruction. So for each of these races, I'm doing a reconstruction, and you can see that more or less it's along the diagonal. Okay, it's not bad, it's pretty decent. This reconstruction is done just based on those 2 sensors. So you have given for each country, you are giving me this information about 7 races. I am reducing it to information about so new timings in some arbitrary races. Those are not physical races, y1, y2. Some new timings I have created, and they're going to store them. Okay, so I've got feature reduction, dimensional reduction, data compression. I can recover the original data also pretty well. So in fact, this feature in process plants, in historians, the data archival systems in industries, many of them do this data compression as they when they store data. They don't store all the raw data they have. They will do some averaging, some moving windows averages, etc. They inherently they have this inbuilt method. So PCA can be thought of as data compression method, where the loss is minimum. Okay. So this is a summary. The 2 principal components could capture about 92.3% variability. The variances in those 2 directions, lambda 1 plus lambda 2, divided by the total variance across all the directions. The 2 PCs could be interpreted in this case. That's just chance. Don't think that always you can interpret those combinations. Just those are data-driven combinations. And the data can be reconstructed well using the 2 PCs because this variability was pretty decent that you captured. 100% variability you will capture. Okay, if you have all the again, you from 7 dimension, you go to a new 7-dimensional space. Okay, in general, few principal components can capture most of the variability in data, leads to data compression, dimensional reduction, and the principal components can be interpreted in some cases, though not always, and we can reconstruct the original data well. Okay. There are some issues. Before I go to the next topic, are there any questions on this? Any questions anybody has on this? Okay, there are no questions. Let me proceed. Some issues are there. I will skip that. I have some statements. I will skip that. I will briefly take you to the next part. Actually, we have only done half of the job. What did I say? Covariance matrix in this track and field example, 7x7 matrix, 7 eigenvectors. I only looked at the first top 2. What about the remaining ones? What does that tell us? The direction where there is less variability. What does that tell us? Okay. What about the principal components corresponding to small eigenvalues? Okay. Small eigenvalues means low variance. What it means is that what if I have some combination where the variance is small? Okay, supposing the variance is 0. Let me just again just illustrate over here what I mean and just the idea, and then I'll show you some example. Supposing we have two random variables, x1 and x2. Okay, just a minute. I have some random variable x1 and x2. If I have some combination 2x1 plus 3x2, I call this as some y. And if it turns out that now you take samples, you get different values of x1, different values of x2. So I keep doing that. Every time I take different values of x1, x2, I get a different value of y. If I now take the variance in those values of y, and if that variance turns out to be 0, what can you say? Even though the individual x1, x2 are changing. Okay, when I look at the combination, the resulting value, if some variable has variance 0, what does it mean? If there is a variable whose variance is 0, means that all the values of that variable are identical, right? Every time I go and hit the same value, it's like a constant. That variable is constant. The individual value is equal to its mean, right? So if the variance of a particular combination is 0, even though these individual variables have some variability, I would know that this combination is equal to a constant. Okay, let's say 0. I have scaled them, I have removed the mean effect. So I can say that even though if x1, x2 has some variance and they have some covariance, if this combination 2x1 plus 3x2 has 0 variance, it means that this combination is equal to 0. So what I get is like I get an equation. Remember my flow example, F1 and F2. F1 can vary, F2 will also vary, but I know that F1 minus F2 will be equal to 0. This has variability, this has variability, the two are correlated. But moment I look at this combination, what combination? 1 times F1 minus 1 times F2. I know that this is 0. So if I can figure out these coefficients plus 1 and minus 1 from data, I have figured out a model, I have figured out a relationship. Okay. So in PCA, those combinations, those eigenvectors where the variability was small, the variance was small, we can think of them as giving us restrictions on the data, giving us the model equations. Okay. So the one directions where there is low variability means the data has some restrictions. Even though individual values can vary, the combination is constant. So I have extracted a model, I have extracted a relationship from data. Okay. So PCA has this particular advantage that even the directions which you ignored, they were low variability, they give you some relationship. Okay. So if yeah, that's what this is saying. If the eigenvalue is 0, then when you project data in the corresponding eigenvector direction, take linear combination of data using this eigenvector, you essentially have extracted a model. If there are several eigenvalues which are 0, see, it will never be exactly 0 because data is always noisy. So the noisy flow rates will not add, F1 minus F2 will not be 0. It's only for the true flow rates. But noisy flow rate, there will be some deviation, but it will be small. So eigenvalue will be small. If there are many eigenvectors with small eigenvalue, you have extracted many relationships. Data is high dimensional. There are many relationships among those variables, not just one, not just two. There could be many relationships, redundancy in the data, right? Many physical. So in the flow example in the morning, we had 5 variables, but I had 3 relationships. So I will find that 3 eigenvalues are small. Okay. So I can extract those relationships in PCA. Okay. Let me show you another example very similar to what we had in the morning. Another flow example. I have 5-dimensional data. I can write balances for F1, sorry, for this particular tank, this tank, this tank. What is the balance? F1 plus F2 minus F3, 0. F1 plus F2 minus F3, 0. F3 equal to F4. F3 minus F4 is 0. And then for the last one, minus F2 plus F4 minus F5 is 0. This is the model. I know it exists. That's how I'm generating the true flow rates. I select 2 of them. The others can be fixed by these relations. Other 3 can be fixed. Okay. Also note that if I have a linear equations, there is nothing sacred about this. I can always do some linear combinations. So I can just combine using something like Gaussian elimination. I can combine them to get this nice structure. This is identity block, and this is the non-identity blocks. So from here I can go here, and from here I can go here. So nothing's sacred in writing these sets of equations. You can combine them and write another set of equations, right? It's like taking balance, not just around this tank, but I can club these 2 tanks together. In chemical engineering, we talk of control volume. What is the control volume that you have? I can write a balance on the overall process. This is the overall city. Okay. I can write a balance on this overall thing. F1 is equal to F5. F1 minus F5 is 0. Okay. So these 2 are exactly equivalent. They are equivalent. So let's just work with this. I generate some data which satisfies these equations. The true values satisfy them. I add some noise, okay, to the true values. So the true values generated in this manner. F1, F2 I choose as 10 plus a random number, 10 plus a random number. Then F3, F4, F5 are chosen so that the equation is satisfied. To simulate the measurements, I add measurement noise on top of all of this. And now question is, using PCA, can I extract 3 relationships amongst these 5 variables? If I do the analysis, I generate the eigenvector. So I generate some 500 or 100 sets of measurements. You look at the eigenvalues and you see something very interesting. 2 eigenvalues are significant, 3 eigenvalues are very small. If I look at the eigenvectors corresponding to these small eigenvalues, these are what I get. So eigenvectors are in rows. So I would say this is my model. This times flow 1 plus this times flow 2 minus this times plus minus 0.43 times flow 3 and so on is equal to 0 is one relation. Similarly, second relation, third relation. Is it similar as the earlier A that we had, the true A? It looks different, but hey, remember that I can always do some linear operations, rewrite these equations in a different way. Again, if I perform Gaussian elimination like steps on this, make this as identity block, just combining these equations, I get this particular constraint matrix, the equation matrix. If you go back to 3 slides before, the true A was, this was I, this was 0, minus 1. I have recovered them pretty well. 0 has become minus 0.03, minus 1 has become minus 0.998. This was minus 1, minus 1, minus 1. I am recovering them pretty well. Why is recovery not exact? Because data was corrupted by measurement noise. My eigenvalues are not perfectly 0. But I have recovered it pretty well. Okay. So the question was asked by Anbumati, from large data set, what do you do? The large data set, you can still do this analysis and extract this model. Assumption here, of course, is there is no sensor which is corrupted by bias. Sensor has only this random variability. There is no bias. If there is a bias, then I have a problem. I have to first figure out that bias before I use it for this analysis. Okay. There is no other type of malfunction in the sensor. You can extract these types of relationships. In fact, I would think that, okay, let me qualify my statement. Probably for PCA, even bias may not affect you because PCA is looking at relationships and bias will not affect this covariance matrix. It just affects the mean of a sensor. It will not affect its covariance matrix. Probably it will work even for that case. Okay. So we recover the original matrix reasonably well, and now I can use this for in my process control or any type of analysis. Okay. So if I come back to the SPND problem I had talked in the morning, okay, recall that we wanted to monitor these sensors, which were these self-powered neutron detectors. We did not have a model to begin with. It was not like a flow equations which I was showing you. The physics people in the reactor operations, they understand how those fluxes are related at different locations in the reactor, sensor 1 and sensor 2. We don't understand that. We just went the data-driven approach. Okay. So essentially we did this PCA and extracted the model first. And then in future, we use that model to reconcile the new measurements that we are getting and run our gross error detection, gross error identification type of tests. Okay. That is what we did. The models were obtained using principal component analysis. There were some more steps like clustering, etc. All these sensors, we did not try to build a model amongst all. We had some 144 detectors. In one shot, I don't want to relate all of them. They may not be related. Rather, I try to find smaller groups of related sensors and build models in each of these groups. Okay. So some processing was done. Some k-means algorithm was used to first group the sensors into different clusters. And this is one particular cluster of 6 SPNDs. This is the A matrix that we obtained from data. If you see, these are the SPND numbers, and you see this is the SPND numbers as used by the plant people. And you see the numbers, sensor number 7, 14, 21, 28, they're all separated by 7. It turns out that they are indeed behave similarly. That's how they are numbered, that they're very close to each other. Okay, so whatever flux one sensor sees, other sensor is seeing similar flux. We did not know that, but from data, one can extract that these sensors are highly correlated, highly related. You can extract models. So we could actually extract 5 relationships amongst these 6 SPNDs, which means that you fix one, others will get fixed. There is no degrees of freedom. Now I can exploit this to perform my data reconciliation, gross error detection. If there is a fault in one sensor, I can figure out that faulty sensor using data reconciliation ideas, which we talked about in the morning. Okay, so that sort of analysis is what I was showing in the morning. We did some analysis, simulation analysis. These are the reconciled plots. We introduced faults in different sensors and saw that we could figure that out. Subsequently, there is a lot more work we have done, and this PCA we have used recursively. The PCA driven, the problem with PCA based approach or any data driven approach is the models have no physical basis. So as process system evolves, the models can keep changing, right? They are an artifact of how the system was operated at that point in time. Okay, it can change over a period of time. It's like an original system is non-linear. You're building some linear models. Yes, you're doing some linearization. The linearization point changes, model changes. So there are things like recursive PCA. You can update these models recursively, okay, to capture time varying relationships. So those ideas also we have subsequently used in this project. Okay, I think I will go to my last slide. There is a lot of other material, but we don't have time for it. But for the sake of completeness, I put it here. So this is a summary for PCA. PCA is useful in a variety of tasks: dimensionality reduction, visualization, data compression, model extraction. So both, you can reduce the dimensions. The top dimensions in terms of variance capture is a low dimensional representation of the original data. The directions which have low variance, which you're ignoring, that represents a model of restriction on the process variables. Okay. There are many other uses like regression. There is principal component regression. You did linear regression. Sometimes that X matrix can have strong collinearities, those variables in the columns of X. So you can use principal component regression. There are several other techniques for dimensionality reduction, and appropriateness depends on problem. Yeah, many other variants in PCA are there. I talked about kernel PCA when you think there are nonlinear relationships in the data and you want to capture them. This basic PCA will not do that. You can use something like kernel PCA. Okay. And these are some of the references. And yeah, with this I am done. Are there any questions I can take? If there are any questions now? Anybody has any questions? I'll stop sharing. Okay, no questions?
Professor, yeah. I also see there is analysis called as factor analysis.
Yeah.
PCA and factor analysis, are they both the same, or?
Yeah. So PCA is one way of doing essentially doing the factorization, you can say. That data matrix X I'm writing as product of two matrices. Let me just share. I mean I skipped that part. Let me go back. You can probably see my presentation. If you see this X, it's one of these slides I had it. Yeah, yeah. Here, if I were to write as okay, so this itself I can see what we are writing X matrix. I can write it as T times some P. I can bring some parts of P over here. I'm trying to factorize my data matrix X as product of two matrices. Okay, so it is a one way of doing factor analysis, you can say, writing it as a product of two. See, what is the idea here? What that we are doing? Okay, let me go to my this thing. Really, in PCA, what have you done? You had the data matrix X. Okay, I have these P sensors, right? And I have the corresponding some N samples. Okay. What I'm saying is that my first, you can say this particular sensor, I have these N readings. Even though I'm measuring P sensors, all these P sensors are not behaving independently. What I can say is there are certain factors. Okay, you can say you can call them as latent variables also. Each of these P, these are the P quantities which I can observe, but each of these P quantities is just a combination of, let me say, if I just put two columns here, okay, I put two columns here, something I have here, something I have here, and then I'm taking, you can say I have these rows here. This x1 value is this value multiplied by this plus the second value multiplied. Sorry, I have done it wrong. Okay, I have done it wrongly. I have put time over here. No, okay. Sorry, let me write it differently. Okay, let me put it. Probably if I do it the other way, it might become clearer. Okay, let me do it slightly. Write the data matrix slightly differently. Let me put the sensors on the rows, okay, and the observation number on the columns. I can write this matrix, okay, in terms of linear combination of two vectors. I will call it vector v1, vector v2, okay, and I have some entries over here, and so on. So what is the size? Let me put P cross n. This will be P cross 2. This is 2 cross n. If you see here, this x1 sensor 1 reading is v1, whatever is the coefficient in v1 multiplied by some number plus v2 multiplied by another number. Okay. So basically what I'm trying to say is I can write this. I think I've again goofed up. Okay, let me give one more shot. I'm sorry about it. Let me go back. Let me write it as I had those n columns. So basically what it says is that each variable, even though you have p variables, originally there are only two variables if I'm restricting myself to dimensions, and each of these p variables is some linear combination of those two hidden variables, latent variables. You can call them as factors. Okay, I might measure 5 flow rates, but independently there are just 2 flow rates. If I tell 2, I can regenerate all those 5 flow rates. Okay, so those 2 flow rates, you can think of them as some factors, some hidden variables. I'll give you another. So PCA is one way of factor analysis. I'll give you another application example. Some application that we are working with right now. Okay, it is related to pollution control. Supposing I am measuring pollution at a particular location. So what do I measure? I measure many different species, many different concentrations, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, nitrogen, etc. Let's say I measure P of them, and I measure for 100 days. Okay. How do I understand this data? I would like to think, supposing I have only 2 sources. Where is this pollution coming from? I have only 2 sources of pollution. What are the 2 sources? Supposing I have a power plant and maybe I burn some fire. When there is an exhaust from the power plant, it will have carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and so on in certain proportion, right? So you can think of that as a vector here. Okay, it will emit carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, etc. It has P components. This is, let's say, this particular vector, column row vector, is for a power plant. And I have similarly another signature, another vector. So if I burn 1 kg of fuel, it emits again those different components in a certain fraction. So this is that signature vector for, let's say, burning. It could be vehicle burning or fire burning, whatever. I mean, fuel burning or fire burning. Each of these observations which I have got here can be thought of as linear combination of just these 2 sources over here, right? I can write a value over here. What is observed for X1, carbon dioxide? That is the contribution of carbon dioxide from this carbon dioxide by source 1, carbon dioxide by source 2, multiplied by some weighting coefficient. That depends on what was the wind pattern on that day, what was the, maybe the temperatures, the meteorology on that day, and so on. Day 2 I go, these coefficients change of the combination, but the source signature does not change. This is specific to the source. How they get combined depends on various other factors, right? So this is factor analysis. The data, you have p dimension data, but this p dimension data essentially can be represented just by these 2 signatures, these 2 vectors. These are hidden vectors to me. I don't know upfront which are those sources. So this is factor analysis. PCA is also solving this problem, factorizing this matrix X into this form. I can call this G and I can call this as F. F has your factors or your sources, and G is a combination of F which is generating your X. So as time changes, G changes. You keep on adding more observations. You keep on adding rows of G. This F is not changing. Okay. So this is your factor analysis. PCA is a type of factor analysis approach, you can say. Okay. So we are looking at one such problem. This is a problem of blind source separation, electrical people call it. Okay. A non-negative matrix factorization. Okay. Many. So PCA is one such tool for doing this factorization. Yeah. So this is a problem in pollution control. I'm measuring pollutants, measuring several pollutants standing outside the gate of our campus. Okay, I get high concentration of some pollutant. Who is the culprit? Whom do I catch if I want to reduce that pollutant? So I really want to figure out which are these sources. Can I figure that out? Is there a power plant which is the culprit in Mumbai? Is it the exhaust of the engines which is the culprit? If it is, then I will say, oh, you need to go for your BS5, BS6 norms in terms of vehicle exhaust. Will that make a difference? So I need to do this type of analysis, that whatever pollutants I'm measuring, what are really the sources for them, right? So factor analysis problem. So PCA you can think of as one way of doing the factor analysis, which looks at the variability aspect. It is giving you, so from p dimensions, here I am going down to 2 dimensions. These are like those eigenvectors we talked about. Each eigenvector is of length p. Okay, but only 2 I am looking at, 2-dimension data set. These are the corresponding coordinates in this 2-dimensional data set for every observation, for every country, for every day I am taking observation. Yeah. So there are many ways of obtaining these, doing this type of factor analysis. So it's called blind source separation, party problem. So in a party, you are known. There are many people who talk simultaneously. You have a set of mics. What you get to hear is a combination of talks of people. So there are 3 people. They talk together. The 3 people are like these 3 signatures. What you get to hear is a combination of these over here. Maybe you have 10 different mics. X1 to X3 are 10 mics. By hearing what those mics are saying, can you figure out who said what at what time, right? So this is a blind source separation problem, party problem. So many different contexts, many approaches, but fundamentally it is like dimensional reduction. I want to try out. So people call these as latent variables, hidden variables. You're trying to extract that from the p-dimensional data set, okay? Because there's something fundamental about it for the problem at hand. Okay, he says one way of doing it. I don't know if it was meant to be that way when it was proposed in 1918, 1920. But yeah, it was trying to compress data. But yes, PCA is also doing this type of factorization. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Any other question? So many other approaches I listed: ICA, FDA, canonical correlation analysis, non-negative matrix factorization, positive matrix factorization. They are all essentially doing this with some requirements. In non-negative matrix factorization, you would say that those sources, those entries cannot be negative. You cannot take negative combinations of those 2 vectors, okay, to get back your X. So you can put some restrictions. Okay, quantities can only add, pollution can only add, they will not cancel out. Okay? When we are doing PCA, we are not imposing any such restriction. Our eigenvectors had negative entries, we were fine with it. Okay, so but you could have it in different settings. Yeah, so a type of factor analysis is what you can think for PCA. Any other question anybody has? Okay, there are no questions. Then let's stop. Let me stop the recording.